Hello and welcome to your notes on common ancestry. If you haven't watched the Vox video yet, go ahead and take a watch of that on the slideshow or on the Ed Puzzle. Either way, take a look at that and watch that video. I'll pause the video right now and go back and watch it. For those of you who've already watched it, vestigial structures are something that shows that we have things inside us from our ancestors that we no longer use anymore. Okay, there are our ancestors. I mean ancestors that are kind of like our grandparents and our parents, but we're talking about thousands, millions years ago. Okay, and how those traits get passed down. What we're going to talk about today is how organisms kind of, similar, and how do we know if they have common ancestry or not? Okay, here is a great example. Okay, embryos are, growing little baby organisms. Okay, now we have humans, chicken, fish, and cat. Can you tell which one is a human, chicken, fish, and cat? Now, trust me, these are all four different organisms, even though they look very, very similar. Okay, pause the video and see if you can figure out which one is which. Let's do C first. What do you think C is? Well, C is a fish. How about B? B is a cat. Okay, A and D. What do you think it is, A or D? We're doing A first. A is a chicken. And D, you're so smart, D is a human. Okay, now why are these all so similar? Well, this is one of the evidences that show that these organisms are all related. Okay, we're all animals. Okay, so there's some evidence that shows that we develop in the same way. Even though chickens and fish grow in eggs, in cats and humans grow in uteruses inside of the female of the species. Okay, we still look the same a lot in these same developmental ways. And why is that? Well, it may have to do with we all share an ancestor from a long, long ago, and we have we're related to them. We have traits from them. Just like you're related to your parents with certain types of traits, we're related to our ancestors millions of years ago through traits as well. Here's another one. How many neck bones does a giraffe and a human have? Okay, so that's a guy with a big old neck, and there's a giraffe who also has a big neck. How many neck bones do you think a giraffe and a human have? Pause and think for a second. Well, we both have 7. Did it surprise you that we both have exactly the same amount of vertebrae? Turns out it's just that they're longer in the giraffe. They're actually the exact same structure. Okay, they look exactly the same, but one is bigger and one is smaller. And that's another piece of evidence that shows that we have a similar structure. We call this a homologous or homologous structure. We'll talk about this in just a moment here. But basically, we have a similar structure, but it does something a little different. Because obviously, our neck is going to function a lot differently than the function of the giraffe. Okay, is a very different function. Ours just holds up our little tiny head. Theirs holds up their big, long neck so they can reach up and get food. And actually, if you didn't know this, giraffes actually use their necks and they actually bash them against each other. And it's kind of a fun video to watch if you ever want to check that out. Here are the evidences of common ancestry we're going to go over today. Homologous or homologous structures. I'll say it either way. There's no wrong way to say it. Just those two ways. We just talked about those. Vestigial structures, which you saw in your video this morning or whenever you're watching this. Fossil record. Maybe you heard about fossils, but those are the petrified remains of organisms that lived a long time ago. DNA similarities. We'll talk a little bit about this, but you guys are pros on DNA. And then embryological structure. You just saw an evidence of embryological structure or similarities in development. Homologous or homologous structures are bodily structures that are similar in structure but different in function. Okay, so we're talking about organisms that have similar things in common. They look the same, but maybe they're used in different ways. This shows that there's a structure in their body that they've gotten from their ancestor. Okay, some sort of limb or bone or part, organ of their body that they have in their bodies, but they use it for something different than their ancestor does, or they use it for something different than somebody else does. Now, we compare organisms that are still alive today, usually, when it comes to homologous structures. Okay, so these are all organisms that are here today: humans, cats, whales. And you can't see it, but it should say bat. Okay, you can see the color-coded bones are all the same. They have the same bones here. Okay, up here for my mouse, you can see this is a humerus bone, this is a radius, and this is an ulna. Okay, these are all our bones in our arm. Okay, now these all bones are used to move things around and hold things. And over here, next we have the cat. The cat is used for walking. Okay, cat, but it still has the same type of bones. There's a little change in shape, but they're used for the same different purpose, I should say. Now, over the whale and the bat, those are very different looks that you might think, but they actually are the same structures. Okay, we see the same bone structures there, but used for very different things. In a whale, obviously, it's used for swimming, and for a bat, it's used for flying. So these are an excellent example of a homologous structure, something that is similar in structure but different in function. Here's another short example. Okay, the fly, butterfly, and ladybug, they all have very similar structures but are used for different things. Okay, this fly beats their wings very, very quickly. The butterfly doesn't beat their wings as quickly. It's a little bit slower beating. And these wings are actually protected underneath an exoskeleton wing. So they're all similar structures, but they're all used differently. Okay, they're all an ancestor of the four-winged dragonfly, a very ancient creature. Now, analogous structures are something that are similar in function but not in structure. This is not evidence of common ancestry. So analogous structures would not be an answer on any exam. This is something that you think that may be similar, like the wings of a bee or the wings of a bird. Obviously, it may not be obvious to everybody here. Just because a bird and a bee can both fly, it doesn't make them related. Okay? The bird and bee has very different wings. The structures are completely different. Even though they both fly, they're not related. Okay. For example, analogous structures. Dolphins and fish can both swim, but are they related? No, they are not related. Fish need to breathe underwater using gills. Okay. If you didn't know this, dolphins are mammals. They actually have a blowhole at the top of their head that allows them to breathe oxygen. So they are not related, even though they can both swim. Oh, and the tail. See how the tail goes left to right and up to down? See how different those structures are? We're looking for similar structures. So when you're looking, use your eyes to see if there's similar structures to see if something's related or not. Here's another example. Okay, homology is our bat wing, mouse, forelimb, and human arm, and analogy is bat wing, butterfly wing, and bird wing. Top is related, bottom is not. Vestigial structures that serve no function but were once useful to structures to early ancestors. Pause to write this down. I'm trying to go quickly here. Ear muscles, human tailbone, and appendix. Okay. Examples of ear muscles. There are muscles there for moving ears. Think about some animals that move their ears. Yeah, your pets at home. Okay. Or animals out in wild. You'll see a whole bunch of them moving their ear to try to hear things. Okay, we don't need to do that. We can move our head around. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. But other organisms don't have as strong a neck, or don't have the need to move their neck around so much. So they have movable ears. Our ancestors used to have those, and we don't. Those are vestigial structures. Our tailbone, also called the coccyx, is something that is left over from when we used to have a tail. Our ancestors did. So over time, the tail was no longer used, and evolutionarily, as we'll talk about later, it was no longer necessary for us to survive, so we don't have it anymore. And finally, there's the appendix. Okay, the appendix is this little part right here. Okay, you'll see the appendix right here on the edge of your large intestine, and it's thought that this was used in some of our ancestors to digest plant material. And as you may know, we are omnivores, secondary consumers, and so we no longer eat a lot of plant material like would a primary consumer. Now, this is thought to be brought over from our ancestors who were primary consumers. We don't really use it anymore. In fact, we get it cut out a lot. Some of you may have had an appendectomy. And an appendectomy is when your appendix gets ruptured and it can release really not so nice stuff into your body. And so you have to remove it. Okay, it's very, very important that it moves, and it's very painful. But again, if we took out your appendix, doesn't really affect you because it doesn't really do anything right now. It's a vestigial structure. Here are our ear bones. Okay, we don't really need to move them around. Okay, So why do we have those muscles? Well, they're there because our ancestors, okay, needed to use them to move their ears around for survival. Okay, we turned out to be able to survive on our own using other things like our big brains and our hands and thumbs, able to use tools, and the ability to have our ears move turned out to be not that important for survival. So we didn't really need to have them work, but they're still there because it's not like they're harming anything. They're just there. And the coccyx, like I talked about, the tailbone. Fossil record. So if you haven't heard about what a fossil is, okay, a fossil is something in the earth that is evidence of a living creature. Basically, what happens is a creature dies and they usually have bones, and those bones are hard, usually made of a mineral called calcium. Okay, and calcium doesn't usually break down or get eaten up by bacteria or other organisms. What happens is that calcium can sit and it can for a long time. Now, sometimes some organisms have died inside of water where there's a lot of sediment, little rocks and stuff, and basically can get covered by a whole bunch of rocks and pebbles. Other times, wind can push a whole bunch of rock and dirt over top of a dead thing, and over time, rock forms over top of the bone. And what happens is, over a long period of time, we're talking about millions of years, rock will replace the calcium in the bones and other minerals to form fossils. Now, fossils are basically just a record of organisms in the past. Now, it's not actually made up of what they are. They're made of rock, but they are impressions that show the size, shape, where they lived based upon where we found the fossils. And then comparing that, we can compare to other fossils that are found around the same area. So it tells us a lot about when did the organisms live and how big they were. Okay, very important stuff. And so we can go back in these rock layers and figure out how related we are to some other organisms. Okay, we can order these rocks based upon different areas, and we can figure out, okay, when do these certain things come from, based upon different areas, different times. Okay, and so we can figure out different forms or different related organisms over the course of human history. If you look at this over here, humans are a tiny little bit of the humongous amount of life that has taken place in this earth. And we've had fossils from every single time of our history found in the Earth's crust. And so we can kind of lay them out and we can actually see transitional forms. We can see organisms changing over time based upon our evidence of vestigial structures, homologous structures, we can see these structures changing and molding over time, and we can track them and tell who are we closely related to? How did we get to where we are today? And we'll talk more about the actual reason and how that happens later on, but we see evidence of our ancestry through our fossil record. Okay, the fossil record allows us to compare organisms today with organisms of the past. Okay. Thanks for sticking with us. Keep going. We're almost done here, guys. If you need to pause and take a break, that's fine too. Here's an example of the horse with fossil records. Okay, so here's our common one at the very bottom. These are different organisms we've seen in the past that have similar ancestry because of fossil records. Okay, MYA stands for millions of years ago. So these are organisms from millions of years ago that have very similar fossil records, and they look similar. So we can go back and we can think about what they might look like. These obviously are just drawings that scientists have believed based upon other organisms at the time, other types of structures, what they like. And we can see that find other organisms that are related to the horse. Here's another example of skulls. Okay. Different things there. DNA. Now, to not go into a large amount of detail here, but overall, DNA is used to translate nucleotide sequences into amino acids. We talked about this a little bit right before we left, talking about the fact that DNA makes RNA, which makes protein. And so we can actually look at DNA between living things nowadays, and we can compare their DNA. If they have similar DNA and proteins, they know that they're related. Okay, how does this work? Well, cytochrome C is a great example. Okay, basically, this cytochrome C is found in all living things that breathe oxygen. Okay, it's an important thing that you need to have to live. And the actual sequence is different. We can look at two different organisms. They're all very different. So we can look at cytochrome C and compare all living things basically based on their amino acid sequence. And we'll see that, our cytochrome C is very different than cytochrome C of a fish, or our cytochrome C is very different from a cytochrome C of a fungus. But the cytochrome C of humans and chimpanzees is identical. And that tells us that we are more similar. That means we have similar proteins. That means genetically we're more similar. Now that means that we didn't come from chimpanzees. It doesn't mean that we came from monkeys. It means that a long time ago, there was an organism that was similar to both chimpanzees and monkeys. And we'll talk more about natural selection and survival of the fittest. But the idea here is that a long time ago, we had a common ancestor with the chimpanzee. The chimpanzee evolved and became its own thing. We became our own thing. And so monkeys evolved and other things evolved another way, and we evolved ourselves another way based upon our surroundings. Okay, but we are related. We have a common ancestry with a chimpanzee. And finally, embryological development. Okay. Closely related organisms go through similar developmental stages early in development. Okay, we usually compare vertebrates being things that have a vertebrae, okay, a spine. Okay, and so we look at different vertebrates and we can see them. This is something I studied a lot in college, and it's basically the same. We look and studied frogs. Frogs are one of the best ways to study this in colleges and things like that. They look at frogs and how they develop, and it's exactly the same in the first few weeks of development. Almost everything is exactly the same between a frog, fish, chicken, and a human. Almost exactly the same. So these show that millions and millions of years ago, okay, we all came from a similar organism that went through this development, vertebrates, okay? And I hate this picture personally, but this is not very correct in a lot of ways, but it just shows kind of a basic idea. Up on the top here, when we start off, okay, whether you're a fish, a turtle, a chicken, a pig, a sheep, whatever it might be, okay, as we start off, we're all very, very similar. And that's probably the most accurate thing. Don't take this as pure fact. This has been debunked, and this image here is not correct in a lot of ways. But as we walk away from this, I just want you to know that this is another piece of evidence that shows that, we start off very, very similar with vertebrae, okay? So thanks for watching here. Go ahead and take us a couple minutes here and make sure that you're looking over this evidence for evolution again, and then complete any other work that your teacher has assigned as well, okay? So as a review, these are our evidences for evolution here. Homologous structures, as we talked about. Let me get this to load up here. Homologous structures, vestigial structures, fossil record, DNA similarities, and embryological structure. Okay, if you have any questions about either one, go back to the video and find the spot that you're looking for, or go through and read it on your own. Thanks for watching. I know this is a long video, but hopefully you made it through. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.